Good evening, everybody. Welcome to School Sojourn tonight. Let me say right up front, class is in session. Andrea should be joining us here in a few minutes. She's having some computer issues that they're trying to get ironed out. So the hope is that she will be here within a few minutes. But if not, you may be stuck with me, but that's not all that bad, I suppose. Well, I wasn't able to join you guys last week, actually, because I had a power outage, kind of freakishly. All the my whole neighborhood lost power like about 2 or 3 hours before I was going to be on with Rupert last week, while Andrea was in Rhode Island, and I wasn't able to join him, and I felt so bad because it was actually going to be my first meeting with him, first time talking with him. I've heard him, bits and pieces on Soul School, or not Soul School, but A World Awakening with Andrea a couple of times, but I'd never met him, and so it was my introduction to him, and also my first time hosting a show with him. And I ended up having to text him and be like, "Hey, Rupert, I have no power, man. So are you okay with hosting solo?" And he was gracious enough to do that. And I heard it went phenomenal. And I had no doubts, but I felt bad to just sort of like baptize him by fire like that. But anyways, I heard it was a great show. I hope it went fantastic. And I'm glad to be here with you guys tonight. So Andrea and I, I was kind of going to give a few minutes here to see if she was going to hop on, but I may just have to hop into the subject matter. I am going to be watching the comments. I do like to do that when it's just me here solo, just so I can kind of see what's going on. So I am going to be watching the comments tonight. So if it ends up just being me, feel free to ask questions and put comments up there, and I'm happy to read them. Anyways, Andrea and I were going to talk tonight about a sort of shared synchronistic experience that she and I have been having, and we've kind of been going back and forth about. Glad to see you too, Shelly. Concerning this synchronistic experience we were having of seeing the numbers 444 or 44 or 4444, just fours in sequence. And this has been happening for a while now. And I want to just say up front that I'm sure we're not the only one having this experience. I'm sure some of you watching this have been having that experience. I'm sure someone watching this had that experience today where you looked at the clock at exactly 4:44, or you saw those numbers pop up on the TV as the first three digits in a phone number or something like that, and it stuck out to you. There are reasons for that. Sometimes I do believe coincidences happen. I do believe that sometimes things do just randomly happen. However, sometimes they happen with such frequency and with such repetition that to dismiss them as mere coincidence is foolish. Some people, when they see numbers occurring in sequences like that, they call them angel numbers. There's all kinds of different kind of catchy ways of talking about that. That's not necessarily my language, but I will tell you what I think it is. See, I just looked up at the timer and it was 4:04 as I'm talking about this. So there's a couple things. There's a couple ways of thinking about this and conceptualizing this. One is, well, you have a thing in your brain called the reticular activating system, and that's basically the part of your brain that is responsible for recognizing patterns. So let's say you buy a new red, what's a car? Let's say you buy a new red Dodge Journey, and you've never really noticed a red Dodge Journey before. You've seen them, no doubt, but you've never really noticed them. Well, once you have one of your own, your brain is now focused on that particular object, and so it's now going to be more likely that you recognize them. And so there is the question of, are you just seeing them more, or are you just now primed to recognize them because the reticular activating system in your brain is now looking for that pattern? I don't know. But even if that's all it isn't a matter of that's all that it is, because think of the power of a mechanism like that if you can harness it. So if you can train your brain to look for this type of opportunity or that type of opportunity, you will see them because those opportunities are all around you, whether you recognize them or not. So even if it is a matter of it's just that, it really isn't just that. That's still a powerful neurological mechanism that can be harnessed and used to propel you forward in life. But I happen to think it's a lot more than that. I do think it is that. I think your body is designed, your brain is designed to recognize patterns. But then I think there's something about the recognition of patterns that causes those patterns to repeat. right? That once you start recognizing them, that there is something about the recognition of the thing itself that causes an increase in the frequency of you seeing this object or seeing this number or seeing whatever. And once you, and here's the other thing, is the divine, God, universe, spirit, whatever set of consonants and vowels and mouth sounds you like to use to give form and shape to that idea, it's always speaking. It wants to communicate with you because it loves you. It wants what is best for you. It wants to see you advance and move forward and become the best possible version of yourself. And so it's always speaking. It's always seeking to communicate with you. The problem is we oftentimes don't have language. We oftentimes don't have the knowledge of spirit's language. And so we are lacking a method of being communicated to by this thing. And so once you recognize a potential sort of language, spirit, God, universe, whatever, will use that to communicate with you. And so once you establish the idea, I mean, when you think about all the different kinds of spirit communication we've come up with over the years, I mean, I think we've come up with these, and then spirit's just like, okay, I'll use that. If that's what you have at your disposal, that is how I will communicate with you. And so, like, if, for example, you say looking at a clock at a certain time and seeing a repeating sequence of numbers is a way that spirit can communicate with you, then spirit will communicate with you in exactly that way. And yeah, that's just how I see that. That's how I understand that. So Andrea and I have been having this shared experience of seeing 444 or 4444 or something like that for many weeks now. And it's kind of just become a thing. We text each other when it's 444 now and we happen to look at the phone. And she was I believe she was at the farmhouse, or I don't know if she was at the farmhouse or she was out there at least. And she woke up at 4:44 and texted me at 4:44. I didn't see it at 4:44 a.m., but it was just a moment of like, she was like, I don't know exactly what this is, but this is definitely something. And I agree. I think there's a powerful and at least semi-clear message that's coming through. And maybe even in the chat, we can go over that. And maybe some of you who are having similar experiences, have an idea of what this means and what you're feeling from it. Well, I want to tell you a couple things that I think that it means. I think, for one, it's a call forward. And that's kind of a silly play on words, perhaps, but obviously, a play on the idea of forward motion. And when things happen in sequences of 3, there kind of seems to be this idea that it's saying, okay, this is a now word. If it happens in 1, it's like a promise. If it happens 2, it's kind of like it's a promise and it's on its way. If it happens in 3s, it's like it's here now. Now is the time. And so the fact that the most frequent way people experience this is 444 tells me that there is a call forward right now. There was a call to move forth, to move forward into your destiny, to move forward into the next phase of your life, into the next phase of your calling, whatever it might be, whatever that thing is that's just been eating at you. Like, it's time to move on this. It's time to act on this, whether it's starting a podcast, whether it's starting a new business venture, whether it's, moving on from the job you're at that's killing your soul and making a move towards a new career path, whether it's starting school, whether it's whatever it is, writing a book. There's something in you. There's this thing you've had in you, burning in you for a long time. You've known, it's kind of like there is a promise. It's there as like this seed, this spark. But now we're in a moment where that seed has been heavily watered, has been warmed by the sun, and it's time for the casing of that seed to break and for the flower to come forth. It's time for that spark. That spark is now being breathed upon, and kindling is being added to it, and it's time for that thing to become a flame. So this is a call forward. And I had an experience the other day, actually. So I don't exactly live the high life. I don't live like a king, we'll say. My wife drives a nicer, newer car, but I still drive my car from 2007, and it kind of gets me from here to there. And so I plan on driving the thing until I can't drive it anymore. But I've needed new tires on this car for a while. Like, I've needed new tires on this car for a while. And, always being the guy who's trying to save a buck, I've kind of been replacing them one by one. And of course, that's not really a good idea because then you get unbalanced and uneven. And I was down to one last tire, right, that I needed to have replaced. And when I took it into the tire place, they were like, you might get a few more months out of this one before you actually have to change it. So I was like, I'll take that. I'll take a few more months. And so I was picking up my daughter who was sick, and then I was going to pick up my son from school. And we're about at a red light, and I blow a tire. I blow this one tire that they told me like 3 days before, you got a few months left on. And this tire blows, and I just skid right off the road perfectly into this parking spot that's directly under a sign for this rust proofing company that I just coast right into perfectly. And right on the bottom of the sign are the numbers 444. And I was thinking about the fact that this is a symbolic way of spirit calling us forward, right? Calling us into forward motion. But there was in my vehicle, my literal physical vehicle, a built-in impediment to my ability to properly move forward. And it was this tire that I had been neglecting to have replaced because I was not willing to pay the price for full mobility and for the ability to truly, move forward in a literal sense. And it made me think of the fact that so many of us are carrying around in our person, right, in our souls and in our beings and in our bodies even, habits, ideas, mindsets, ways of thinking, old patterns that we've known we've needed to change for a very long time now, but we've been unwilling to pay the price to change those things. And so we've been driving around on bald tires, so to speak, that are about ready to blow out on us. And sometimes spirit, in the name of calling us forward, in the name of compassionately calling us forward into our destiny, will allow us to have a blowout to force us to make a change that we're otherwise unwilling to make because we're unwilling to pay the price. And in this moment, my literal vehicle and the vehicle, in whether it's in dreams or in visionary experiences, the vehicle usually represents the thing that's meant to take you from here to there. Quite obviously, it represents the mode of transportation from where you're at now into your destiny. I had this, there was a breakdown within that thing, and I safely coasted right off to the road. I didn't even have a proper jack in this car. I just had the one that kind of comes with it. That's, really not all that great. I didn't even have a four-way in there. I had a wrench that I'd already bent the crap out of at a previous attempt of changing a tire before. And but it just so happened they came out with a nice floor jack and a four-way, and it was just like the most perfect scenario you can imagine in an imperfect situation. But my point is, I was neglecting making a change that I needed to make in order to properly move forward, right? And so I was forced to make a change that I was dragging my feet on making because I was unwilling to pay the price. And so I'll say for some of you, if this is, you might not even be having this exact synchronicity in your life of seeing this repeating pattern of numbers. However, I will say, I think one of the messages here, at least, is this, that we're being called forward, into a new day, into a new moment, into a new phase of your life. But there are some things you've been holding on to, be they habits, be they mindsets, be they just old patterns, old ways of thinking, whatever, that are built-in impediments that are eventually going to cause a breakdown, right? You are eventually going to have a blowout. And so in compassion and mercy for you, divine things will happen in your life that will, hey, there she is.
Hi, my sister's standing right behind me. We just fought for 20 minutes to get online.
Well, you fought valiantly and you won because you're here. So,
Sorry about everything being a mess.
We don't know what happened, why, or how. We just, it did.
I'm just glad you're here.
I'm so glad. So Bill was telling me in text that, turning the volume down, that we're talking about 444, which we had discussed because this has been a recurring thing for both of us for at least the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Like suddenly, all of a sudden, we're seeing it constantly. So what have you said so far? Just repeat yourself. Nobody will care.
Yeah. No, I was just simply, I just kind of explained the idea, first of all, of once you agree upon the fact that spirit can communicate with you in a certain way, let's say through a repeating sequence of numbers, then spirit will take that opportunity. And so once you agree, and so like if no one's ever experienced that before, well, simply agree upon the fact that this is a valid form of communication and language. And once you acknowledge it, Whatever it is that's out there communicating will use it to communicate with you. And then I was kind of just speaking of the fact that 4 obviously being a play on forward motion. And that 444, when things happen in visionary experiences or prophetic experiences, when they happen in sequences of 3, it's typically indicative of the fact that it's a now, it's like a now word. 1 is a promise, 2 is it's a promise and it's on its way, 3 is it's here and it's time to move on it. And so I was speaking of the fact that the 4 could represent a call forward, a call into the next phase of your life, into the next, phase of your destiny or whatever. And I was telling this story about the fact that I drive, I don't live like a king. I still drive my car from 2007. My wife has a nicer, newer car, but I'm just the kind of guy who neglects anything that pertains to me and will usually not go to the doctor for 10 years and drive my car until it's like, basically 4 tires on a frame, and because I think that's just typical of my personality. But I've needed new tires on this car for a long time now, and I've been slowly, because I can also be a little cheap, not cheap, but frugal. And
frugal.
So that's a better way of saying
all
it.
Things being based on semantics alone. Frugal.
Yes, frugal. And so I've been slowly changing tire by tire, but that's not a good idea because then you get out of whack and out of balance. And
right.
So I was 1 tire away from having a full new set of tires on my car. And they had told me at the tire shop, you've got about 6 months or a few months left on this. And so I'm like, okay, cool. Got this. Driving, went to get my daughter who was sick from her school. Then I'm going to pick my son up from his school. And we have a blowout. And we skid right into a parking space. And we're right beneath a sign. Written right above it is 444 on the sign. And I was speaking of the fact that built into, because vehicles in visionary experiences or dreams typically are symbols of that which takes you from this step or this place to that place. Obviously, whether it's a business model, whether it's a ministry, whether it's a family, whatever, it represents the thing you're in that's moving. And there was built into that a flaw that was going to eventually, impede me in my journey. And so mercifully and graciously, I had a blowout to force me to change something that I would have otherwise drug my feet on changing. And also, it was best case scenario in a bad scenario. Like it was a body shop, and I didn't even have a proper jack. I had the jack, but it was the one that comes with your car that sucks.
Know, they're awful.
They're awful. And I didn't even have a 4-way. I just had the wrench that comes with that. And I'd already bent that to hell the last time I tried to get a lug nut off the car. And I was like, oh, shoot, I forgot I did that. And I was like, man, what am I going to do? And so the lady who owns the place comes out with a floor jack and a 4-way and spray to get the lug nuts off. And I'm like, this is like the nicest flat tire experience I've ever had in my life. And then my point is, though, it was a merciful experience because there was built into my mode of transportation this flaw that was going to take me down in some way, right? And so it happened in this merciful way, but I was also forced to make a change that I would have otherwise drug my feet on making. And so the call to forward motion will sometimes look like hiccups and interruptions in your life, monkey wrenches thrown into your plans because all the best laid plans of mice and men and all of that. There will be things that will go awry that in the moment you might misjudge as being, oh, it's bad luck, or I did something to cause something negative to happen, or I manifested this negative circumstance. But if you have eyes to see and you look deeply and closely enough, you'll realize that it's mercy causing you to, quote, change a tire that needed to be changed anyways, because what if it would have happened on the highway during a thunderstorm, right? What if it, exactly,
it happened? You have to do what if.
Exactly.
What if this scenario occurred, but it occurred that way?
Right.
Or this way. I've had those moments myself. I mean, moments of grace.
Mm-hmm.
I was on a highway and caught in a squall where the snow was so heavy.
Yeah.
Each flake, quote unquote, was coming down like the size of a quarter, saturated, and it burned out the motor. Of my windshield wipers. And I've got an 18-wheeler in front of me, an 18-wheeler behind me, and an 18-wheeler on the side of me. And I knew I was going to die. And the first thing I thought is, I'm 29. I'm too young to die.
Yeah.
And I had my hands like gripped on, I could see nothing and something covered my hands that was warm and took me off the highway into the breakdown lane, where I proceeded to put the emergency lights on and then sob uncontrollably for 10 or 15 minutes. And then all of a sudden I saw blue lights behind me, and that officer had my car towed. He drove me home. He made sure I was home safe. He was an earth angel. Absolutely extraordinary Rhode Island state trooper.
Yeah.
You know, we have those moments that not only reaffirm our faith in humanity, but also tell us that we are loved, we are guided, and we are protected. And when we are in tune with that, when we are in touch, connected with that energy. And I think the repetitious seeing of 444 suddenly in the last couple of weeks is indeed indicative of not only practicing the presence of having that experience inexplicably. And it's not like, I don't think your mind just trains to it. I don't. Because I'm always doing 1,000 different things in 1,000 different places, but all of a sudden I'll just look at my phone, and there it is. Or I'll look at the clock, and there it is. And there's no explaining it other than messages. That we are being given messages that we are connected, that we are doing what we're supposed to do, and that there is change coming, and that it is forward momentum. I just lost my home to a flood. What is it about God and floods, Jeff? You want to go there tonight? Really? Do you?
I don't know.
Is it? It took a month to move out of a 7-room house. You know, into basically a 5-room house. Oh my
well, I mean,
God.
the symbolism of the flood in the book of Genesis, I don't read it literally, but the symbolism, you know, because the earth was understood to be something like a flat disc in Mesopotamian mythology at the time, and then there would be a dome over top, and there was a fresh water above that dome, which is what the sky was understood as being, and then salt water beneath. And so at the flood in Genesis, it says that the fountains of the great deep broke up, which released the salt water from beneath, and then the windows of heaven were open, so it let the water in from above. And so essentially what it did was it flattened, in this mythological way of understanding things, it flattened everything out, because prior to, it said that there was just chaotic waters, and God sort of created a bubble in between the waters. So actually, the water coming in and the water coming up represented the old creation being done away with, and then so that a new creation could come forth. So symbolically, in the language of Old Testament at least, flood can represent almost a forced new beginning, you know?
It really is a forced new beginning. But here's bizarre. Actually, it's not a 5-room house. It really is a 7-room house. We went from 7 to 7, but the layout is so open that 3 rooms really feel like 1. Very modern compared to the older style, more traditional house that we came from. We didn't lose anything but the bottom inch of a theater-sized Conjuring poster. That is all we lost in a flood that took out 3 rooms. Gone. Floors, walls, everything.
Isn't that just amazing? Like, because
how is that possible?
Yeah. And that's the question, isn't it? I mean, that's mercy, because obviously it was time to move on in some way.
It was. And the universe said so. And the thing is, and Erin, God, I hate when she's right about shit, but she is right about this. She's like, you wouldn't have done this if not for a crisis presenting itself. And you wouldn't have gone down to Florida and cleaned out your office and cleaned out your bedroom and I gave 8 bags of clothes to Goodwill. You know, I mean, 10 bags of clothes to Goodwill, and I'm not done yet. You know, things that I've had for 20 or 30 years that kind of look new still, because I'm very careful with my clothing. I take good care of it. And classic styles. So These are things that someone's going to be able to use. They'll feel really good in. They won't know where it came from, but I'll know that I gave it to help someone else.
Yeah.
And stuff I'm never going to wear again. Beautiful jackets and stuff that, you know, I haven't worn for 8 or 10 years.
Yeah.
So bye-bye.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a cleansing. It's a healing. It's a,
Right.
it's, I have been lifted up. Everybody's telling me what happened between Ocean State Paracon in September and me at Halloween in October. What happened in that 8-week period of time. And my life went through an entire transition. So I'm not surprised that I'm seeing angelic numbers all around me, me.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that was really the message that I got from it as well with the tire issue, was that I coast right in, right under the numbers 444. I don't even notice it right away. I don't even really notice it until after the fact. And I've been sitting there under it, and I'm like, yeah, of course I'm right under those numbers. Right. But the message there being to me, like, this was something you needed to do. You weren't going to do it because you weren't willing to pay the price to make the change that would have caused you to be more successful in forward motion in your literal vehicle.
Yeah.
And so in the most merciful way possible, this situation was arranged so that you could get fixed what needed to get fixed so you could properly move forward. And symbolically, there are things in our lives that we hold on to, habits, old patterns of thought, old ways of doing things, even locations that were meant to move beyond, because there are physical locations that will serve and feed your spirit in one season, but that will sap you dry energetically in the next season. And that's because you become one with your environment. It's hard to actually say where your environment starts and where you start. Like, you eventually merge and become one in some way. And that's why sometimes if you're feeling a deep inner issue, but you've also got external issues, like maybe a room needs to be tidied up, you can actually address the inner issue by facing the outer issue, because you do become entangled with your environment. And sometimes you need to make an environmental change and shift, but you get comfortable. Who wants to go through the hell in the process of moving? You know, it's not fun. Looking for a house, trying to, get a loan, all that. It's just a major headache.
Well,
but it needs to happen sometimes. And so sometimes circumstances happen in such a way where you have to make the move. Otherwise, what would have happened if you don't? We don't know. We don't know what worse thing could have happened from staying.
But actually I do know. I mean, I do know what worse thing could happen. I've lived through 3 hurricanes in that house. And flooding before, not like this, but flooding before. But here's the thing. This is how smiled upon my father was, how smiled upon our family has been, my father and me in particular. About a year, maybe a little longer, 1.5 years ago, my father started seeing a lovely woman named Carlene. And she's an earth angel. I'm absolutely certain of it. She is one that walks the walk. She walks the walk, and she spends her life doing things, wonderful things for other people. And I was like, you lucky bastard. At 87 years old, you fall in love. Right. Again, after years. I mean, he's never really been in love since my mother. He never really has been. And she's just, so we find out like 3-4 weeks ago that she and my mother are related. They're both from Clan Buchanan in Scotland, going back, I don't know, a couple thousand years. Wow. All one family. Clan Buchanan, all one family. They're related. There's that.
Yeah.
Then Carlene has this big, beautiful home on the southeast side of Orange County in Florida, near the airport at Orlando International, like 5 minutes away from the airport, 7 tops in bad traffic. And she moved in with my father about 1 year ago, and she staged it and put her house on the market. She got a few offers. They were coming in a little low. She's like, no, it's worth every dime I'm asking for it. I'm just going to hold out till I get my buyer. as water poured through the back door of my father's office, right through the door. He said it looked like a waterfall. She was on the phone with her realtor saying, yank it off the market right now. We're moving into it. I'm moving home.
Wow.
Insto house.
Yeah.
That she had already cleared out, given a lot of things to her kids, and, made space to show it, to sell it. Instant house. It's beautiful. It's lovely. It's in a gorgeous neighborhood. And how fortunate, how graced, how lucky can you get that this is how it worked out?
Yeah.
And that she came here with my father to bring me back after I spent a month down there huffing it, getting all the big antiques, all the little things sorted, a bajillion things done, and completely moved into my new office, my new bedroom, my new bathroom, all my stuff gone through. Something I'm telling you, I would never have done. I would have left for loved ones to deal with, probably, at least some of it.
Yeah.
And there we had an instant new home. That's, I don't know what to call that. I don't know the word. You tell me the word. I mean, for me, it's miraculous.
I was going to say, I think I'm comfortable with that word.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the spirits at the farmhouse, it doesn't, I like to know who they were, but that's not what matters to me. That they still are is what matters to me. That in the present moment, engagement, acknowledgement, reverence, respect, communication is what matters to me. And everything I did in the last week, being on the road for 8 days, oh my God, everything that I did was an affirmation of what you and I have been sharing in text messages every day.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's amazing. Like so I'm even thinking too, as we're talking, my eyes are red from, I've been poring over Jung today, reading about the concept of squaring the circle, right? And so, that's obviously, that goes back to alchemical traditions and whatever. It's basically the concept of drawing a square and a circle, each of which have the same area as the other, which is thought to be an impossibility. And it's thought of in magical circles that if you can do that, you can actually cause some sort of spiritual change, physical change, whatever. And Jung looked at that as, well, actually, even people say squaring the circle is a way to speak about something impossible, right? But the concept of the squaring of the circle goes back to even to the Genesis account of creation, when it says, in the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth. Biblically speaking, the heavens are circular, which is why the domes on top of Orthodox churches are typically, they're domes, they're circular. Right. And the earth is thought of in terms of something square. Now, I just said in Mesopotamian mythology, it's a round disc, but it depends on where you're reading, because the Bible also talks about the earth having 4 corners, right? Northeast, south, and west, but it's thought of. Oh,
yeah, that's a phrase. The 4 corners of the earth is a phrase.
Right. So when God creates the heavens and the earth, it's the circle and the square, essentially. And he creates them, and they're meant to be reconciled one to another, right? To map over one another. It's the compass and the square that the Masons, that makes the square, whatever. Anyways, so this is an image that appears in religious, in all faiths, really. But so it's about heaven and earth kind of mapping on top of one another, of reconciling these two with one another. So in Christian theology, whether it's Gnostic Christian theology or even just more Orthodox Christian theology, the concept of Jesus as the Christ is meant to be the reconciliation between those two things, but because the Christ is heaven and earth in one being, perfectly reconciled. So these things that don't seem like they go together, the circle is squared, the squared is circled in this individual. And then when we see that in that individual, we all can wake up to the fact that the circle is squared in us as well. And we are also this point of convergence. We're also this point where heaven and earth collide and coalesce, and we are whatever. But as we're talking about these events where it seems, I'm talking with my hands and with my pen a lot tonight, I don't know.
I do it. I do it.
When we're talking about
Can't
these
help
events,
it. I'm almost Italian. Oh,
yeah, I must have some in me somewhere. When we talk about these events that on the surface seem very negative, like blowing a tire, losing a home, that's like chaos, right? But in mythological terminology, chaos and then the ordering principle always work together to create the world. And if you have either one of those two things, is it the I'm even thinking of the card in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck where you have the pillars of the temple, the black pillar and the white pillar, and I can't think of the card. Somebody help me out here. Okay, anyways, but you have the two pillars in black and white. They represent two extremes. You can't enter the temple by way of either one exclusively. You have to enter down the middle, and you have to have a balance. So, but that's the mapping too of those principles. And so it's the squaring of the circle. It's finding this balance where they're really the same thing. And so these events happen: blowing a tire, losing a house, losing a job, whatever it might be, the breakdown of a friendship or something. My dad, finding out he had to have a quadruple bypass, these things that seem on the surface, oh my God, you've got clogged arteries. Well, yeah, but he didn't have a heart attack. It saved his life. You know what I mean? He's got 10, 15 more years left in him as a high priestess. Thank you. That is the card. But these things that on the surface seem evil, this has to be just bad luck. How could it actually ends up that the square and the circle are one and the same? The circle is squared when you see in it the blessing of this new home that's open, where I can breathe more in whatever this. Well, I'm now driving on 4 new tires. I mean, that's just kind of not really something that should be noteworthy or worthy of celebration. That should just whatever.
Speaking of notes, see these?
Yeah.
Post-it notes, these. We've talked many times about energy. Everything is one thing. Everything is energy. Everything is consciousness. Everything is existence as we know it and perceive it.
Yes.
And we'll take a Sharpie. I won't mess it up, but we'll take a Sharpie and we'll write off and stick it to something. This is bad. This is good.
Right.
And we label and label and label and label the events of our lives and compartmentalize them when they actually all weave together in this magnificent tapestry of challenging, informational, educational, spiritual ascension that occurs when we let it.
Yes.
When we don't try to separate this from that. Separation is the illusion.
Yes.
If everything is one thing, then you can't necessarily, of course, there are exceptions. Yeah. Killing people wantonly in the streets is a bad thing. It's bad.
Right.
But I'm talking about the events of our lives. And sometimes we perceive them as, extremely inconvenient to financially devastating, emotionally, bringing us a feeling of bereavement that leaves us bereft. Losses in life, people, things, places. But when I think we get to the end and we look back and we see how every single event held hands with the one preceding it and the one to follow.
Yes. Yep.
And there's an interlocking, a meshing of the events of our lives as though they travel a Venn diagram when in fact they're riding the frequencies of where we are, how we're growing, how we're ascending, how we're developing and evolving.
Yes.
And anybody that just stagnates in life and never changes is missing out on the richness and the fullness of life. Change is good. It's the only constant in the universe.
Yes.
And yet we fight it all the time.
Yes.
And this taught me to embrace the change. This
Yes.
was such an over-the-top event in my life, coupled with one paracon after another, after another. You know, I mean, starting back in last April, I've been going out, you know, pretty straight out.
Yeah.
And this was the biggest wrench ever thrown into my gears in my life. And I'm, dare I say, happy that it happened.
Yeah. Well, and I would have never thought even the news about my father would have been something that I could be happy about.
Right.
But what's better? Going along, you know, going about your day and then overexerting yourself, having no knowledge of what's going on within your rib cage and dying, or taking a stress test because you're having heartburn and the doctor telling you, there might be an issue. And yeah, it resulted in a quadruple bypass, but it was preventative, you know? I mean, it's like, and so I am grateful. And not only am I grateful, but even as I sat in the hospital and I saw the outpouring of love for my father from all the people that were coming to just gather around our family, even the doctors. We had two of the top surgeons in the hospital that are like my dad's best friends that were there making sure we had everything and we always knew what was going on, you know, because my dad's a pastor in the area. He's well known and well loved. And, you know, I mean, it was like, even just that, I was sitting there like in awe of my dad. And it left me in the aftermath of that being like, if I can be half of what he is, if I can be 10% of what he is, I'll have done what most people never get around to in 10 lifetimes, you know? And so even that, there was a call forward to growth in me as a man, you know, as a husband, as a father, as everything else. So even in that sense, I can say I'm grateful for it. It also made me aware of the heart history in my own family that I wasn't aware of, to where I'm like, okay, I got to make some physical changes as well, because this is a history, this is reality. And I'm 41 years old and I got a family. So whatever, like I would have never thought I could say thank you for that. But there is something within that to be thankful for if you look for it. Jesus said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. There's something about the purity of the heart that allows you to see God where somebody else, or, you know, you in another state might see the exact opposite, right?
Yeah.
And there was another thought that came to me as you were talking, and it's the idea of when we come to these moments of forward motion, when we come to these moments of this accelerated call forward, right? That we have to make choices to let go of things that, I hate this terminology, but I'm going to use it because I can't think of anything better, but that no longer serves us. And I hate that terminology only because it's oftentimes used by people who have never served a thing in their life. And I think it's more important to learn to serve than it is to be served, but whatever, that's another message.
I agree with you completely on that.
But you also understand what I mean. It's not really, it's impeding you rather than.
It does. Yeah. It doesn't serve a purpose anymore. It doesn't fill a void. It doesn't. Yeah. It just doesn't matter anymore.
Right. And so the illustration I was writing the other day, actually, I took the screen cap of my phone to send you. It was 4:44 as I was writing this down in my notes. And it just seemed, it actually corresponded. And you made the connection that I didn't even intend to make, because I was just saying, hey, it's 4:44. But I was writing this little essay to myself saying, like, let's say that you were wrongly imprisoned on this prison island, and you worked hard to escape, and you worked your way through the tunnels, and you whatever, and you find this little boat tied to a dock, and you hop in that boat and you row the hell out of that thing, and you get out of there and you escape and you hit dry land a couple of hours later, and you know it's only a matter of time until they realize you're gone and they'll be on your tail. And so you drag the boat up onto the shore. What sense would it make to drag that boat on your back through this new landscape that you've arrived at? It doesn't serve your purpose in any way, shape, or form to continue to drag that boat on your back. But you might feel, in leaving that boat behind, I'm dishonoring the thing that brought me into freedom. But you're not leaving that thing behind, because that boat is as a spirit that has form wrapped around it. That boat, the spirit of that boat is forward motion. The spirit of that boat is liberation and forward motion for you. And in leaving it behind, you actually crack the shell and release the spirit of that boat to continue to carry you forward. And you might have to cut that boat into pieces and burn it and use it as firewood to keep yourself from dying that evening when the temperature drops. Or you might have to hack it into pieces and use it to make tools that will help you, knock vines and branches out of your way as you traverse this jungle, whatever you're in now. And you don't dishonor it by breaking it. You don't dishonor it by burning it and breaking it, or in simply leaving it behind. You actually release the spirit of forward motion that boat represents, so you can continue to move forward. And then once you cut your way through the jungle, you might have to fashion a new tool to climb the mountain that lays in front of you now, whatever it is. And at every turn, you're having to discard things that represent that call forward, but you're discarding of them. It's not a disrespecting, and it's not a dishonoring. It is actually an honoring of the thing, because the thing represents a spirit. It represents a call forward that you only honor sometimes by letting it go. Sometimes that's the only way you can honor the last season, is by letting go of it. I honor the last breath I took by letting it go, because that's what welcomes the next one. To hold my breath, powerful. Right? And that's how you honor it. And I've even found that in my own faith, my own faith experience it's evolved. As you can probably tell by the way I talk, I'm not the fundamentalist Christian that I used to be, but I don't in any way feel like I live a life of dishonor to that. I don't in any way feel like I live a life of dishonor towards my parents who raised me in a certain tradition. I actually feel like I honor it by moving forward and becoming what the spirit of that thing was trying to fashion me into. Because in everything, there is a quote unquote spirit, and I use that word metaphorically, but it's a call forward. And you don't honor it by staying stuck in it. You honor it by following the trajectory. And for my parents, that trajectory, because of where they were in life, it took this form. But then for me, it's got to take this form. And then for my kids, it's got to take that form. But at every turn, we're actually honoring the thing, not dishonoring the thing. And I was reading Jung's answer to Job this week, and I'm a big Jung fan, as you can tell.
Yeah, I am as well. So yeah, I get it.
But in his answer to Job, because his father was a minister, he had ministers on both sides of his family, but his father kind of lost his faith. And Jung, in his answer to Job, he writes, I think he's in his 70s or late 60s when he writes it at this point, but he writes a very Gnostic interpretation of the book of Job, in which God is basically learning, right? God is looking at Job, and God comes down and is like, hey, Job, who are you to complain about all the suffering I've inflicted upon you? Were you there when I did this, that, and the other? And God actually comes around and realizes the absurdity of his own argument. And he's like, wow, I have caused you a lot of pain, haven't I? And God basically repents, right? And really kind of the symbolism that even Jung brings out is that Job is basically God who's become incarnate, and God is realizing what he's done to himself in Job. And then at the end, when Job has all of his fortunes restored to him, God kind of realized, yeah, but at the same time, maybe suffering sometimes worth it. It's a very interesting read.
It's a complicated but also a very interesting read. Yes.
And according,
I read it in college.
Yeah. And in Orthodox Christian terms, completely heretical. However, in Jung's mind,
heretical.
But Jung, in his mind, believed he was saving his father. He believed he was saving his father's faith that he lost, because he was thinking to himself, this is maybe what could have kept him, maybe would have given him hope. And so for Jung, he was discarding a form, and then he was rediscovering another one. And so when the spirit of forward motion calls you, and it says it's time to move, forward, onward, it's time to move. There are things you're going to have to leave. There's boats you're going to have to leave at the shore. There's boats you might have to burn. There's boats you might have to repurpose. But when you burn it, when you repurpose it, when you break it apart, when you leave it, you're not dishonoring it. And it's crucial to not carry that dishonor in your heart and be like, this goddamn boat, it's just a hindrance to me now. I can't, how am I supposed to traverse through this forest with this boat? Well, you don't have to. You can leave it, and you can honor it for what it was. Yes. And so that's really key in moving forward, is the impediments. And some of the things that have become impediments were the things that brought you where you're at to now. And so lovingly say goodbye. Make it a graduation and not a divorce, right? Kiss it on the forehead goodbye, not shoo it away and shun it. And that's key to moving forward as well. Otherwise, you end up like, if I'm carrying a boat on my back trying to escape prison guards who are after me, well, I'm going to be caught in a matter of days.
Yeah.
But if I leave it behind, I find freedom.
Yeah. And then you lighten your burden, your yoke.
Yeah. And the spirit of the thing remains with you, because the spirit of
the thing remains with you, because it is what got you where you are.
Yes.
So really what we've just talked about for an hour, as Bill counts us down here, is metamorphosis, spiritual transformation, rapid evolution, like a quantum leap in our own spiritual evolution.
Yes. And
I think that there are periods in each one of our lives when there's this almost staccato, rapid force that exerts itself on us, that pushes us over the precipice that we've dangled on for a while and looked down like, oh man, that's bad. That is a long way down. And when you get that little nudge, that little pat on the back, boom, right over the edge.
Yeah.
And you see how dark it is. And then you keep falling until you find the light.
Yes.
And we're finding the light.
Yeah.
And it's angelic.
Yes.
And it's incredibly powerful. And it's pure of heart. And it's love. It's higher love. It's divine. For me, it is. And I know there are people that are not even comfortable with us using some of these words, like, oh, no. Yeah. But for me, I am saying, for me, it feels divine.
Yeah.
And this show was divine for me. I'm sorry I was late. We have to go. So we have to say class dismissed. But you and I both know, along with everyone that's watching this, class is never dismissed. Not in Soul School.
No.
So I love you dearly. I'll call you over the weekend.
Yes.
And to everyone, always, always be the light you seek.
Yes.
Good night.
Good night.